moving on to, well, Rachel, let me get past this. Okay, so we remember that Rachel is the beloved of Jacob. Rachel is the favored one of Jacob, and but of course Leah is his first wife because of Laban's deception. So we're starting in chapter 30. Rachel is just beside herself because she is barren. So I thought we'd just focus a little bit tonight on barrenness because it's such a huge it's such a big thing in the Bible about, and back in that culture, about women being barren. So I'm going to start with Genesis 30, 1-2. And when Rachel saw that she was not bearing children to Jacob, she envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said to her, "Am I in the place of God that I have prevented you from having a child?" Okay, so I thought let's look at what barrenness really meant back then. And barren, a woman who was barren was an outcast. People believed that if a woman was barren, then she must have some kind of evil way about her, or she must have there was something from her past, because that was the belief, and had no status. And of course, other than this story, their husbands could just do away with them if they couldn't bear children. And so we'll just start out here, okay, because Rachel is frustrated. She has not born children. And remember, Leah's the one that started to bear children. And there's an ongoing, this is a sister thing, but an ongoing competition. Leah wants to gain the favor of Jacob and believes that she should, because she has born him sons. But Rachel is the, quote, we'll just use the word, chosen one. If you go back to the well, and when he met Rachel, and it's clear that she's the chosen one, but she doesn't have any children yet. So she's going through these machinations. So there's no way to describe the reproach an Eastern wife feels if she cannot conceive and remains barren. So the women will do anything. Okay. And this belief, it actually carries through to today. Okay. Conception is sacred and blessed in the Near East. Semitic people believe that human reproduction is profoundly holy, for it is God's life reproducing itself in the life of a human being. Now, I'll add a little bit here. They believe to this day that it takes 3 to make a baby, to conceive and have a baby. And the 3 is a man, a woman, and God. And the emphasis with God is very strong. And that's why Jacob got so angry. But when Rachel said to him, well, just do something, it's kind of like, it's your fault, or I'll die. But that was a belief, and God had to play a part. There's no question, and still does. That is the way they do it. Conception. Now, in a more literal sense, we always, and this is a gentleman by the name of Abraham Rabbani. He was a actually he was Lebanese, but Syrian was his religion, very similar to the Eastern religion. So in a more literal sense, we always understood the saying of the psalmist, children are a heritage from God, from the Lord, and that is Psalm 127:3. Above and beyond all natural agencies, it was He, God, who turned barrenness to fecundity and worked the miracle of birth. To us, every birth was miraculous. And here you have and childlessness, an evidence of divine disfavor. That was the belief. So you can understand why Rachel was so upset, especially when her sister kept reproducing.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How about in the instance where a man had several wives, which was common in that time, and none of them got pregnant? Did they ever say, must be something wrong with the man?
I don't know, but I think they wouldn't publish that in the Bible because you know, it's a man's world, and like, whoa, it couldn't possibly be the man's fault, if you understand what I'm saying. So it that's a good question, and that may have happened, but you would never see that in the Bible because, like I say, they don't talk about women, in very few women do they talk about, because it was a man's world. No, there's no question about it. All right. So she had her own plan. All right. Then Rachel said to him, behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also be comforted by her. And she gave him her maid Bilhah to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God has judged me and has also heard my voice and has given me a son. Therefore, she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, I have besought the Lord and pleaded with my sister, and I have attained my desire. And she called his name Naphtali. Now, let's look at this. Let's look at this, what this really. All right. In the cases where women were barren for a long time, all right, they had the custom that the maid or whomever could be given to the husband, and the custom that would establish the child's legitimacy, or it'd be the same as adopting him, by placing the child on Rachel's knee. That's why it says, she shall bear upon my knees. Once that occurs, then now, and this is a belief. This wasn't necessarily God's law, but then the child would then become Rachel's to call her own. So she now has two children, and that's pleasing to her, kind of. Okay, but she's at least competing with her sister, and so Jacob has two sons. Now, remember back when we studied initially Sarah, and this is the same thing that Sarah did. Remember, Sarah gave Hagar, oh, I'm sorry, that shouldn't be Jacob, apologize, but Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham, and Ishmael was born from that. And what we're going to see here is that though they were sons. Okay, Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn. Okay, and they were considered sons of Jacob. These other two, because it's his seed. Okay, but it was a custom, but these children of the maid servants, technically they were not quite up there with the child, because remember, Ishmael was kind of put out of the picture. Ishmael became the Muslim leader, but he was put out of the picture when Sarah gave birth to Isaac. So just so we keep that in mind, but this is the custom. This is what they did. But now we go, but the story gets thicker. All right. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, all right, she took her maid Zilpah, did the same thing that Rachel did, and gave her to Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, "My fortune has come." So she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, "The girls will sing my praise." So she called his name Asher. Okay, well, like I say, Rachel gave her maid to Jacob, and so Leah did the same thing because she had stopped bearing. Now, all right, so now we get to a subject that I never understood for a very long time, but I'm pretty sure I understand it now, and I'm going to share it with you guys. All right, let's read the verses, and then we're going to talk about mandrakes. Okay, and Reuben went at the time of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah said to her, "Is it not enough for you that you have taken away my husband? And would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" And Rachel said, making these deals, okay, "He may lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." So Leah is trading the mandrakes for Jacob to come to her tonight so that she can conceive. And when Jacob came home from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in unto me, for surely I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. And God hearkened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob the fifth son. And Leah said, "God has rewarded me because I have given my maid to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore Jacob the sixth son. And Leah said, "God has enriched me exceedingly. Now my husband will surely have more affection for me because I have borne him six sons." So she called his name Zebulun. That is what women did. And the more sons they have, then they should be, according to this, they should be more, their husbands should be more accepting of them. In this case, of course, it was not, because Jacob was in love with Rachel, and Rachel was the one that technically chosen by God, or God divinely intervened for Jacob to have Rachel. Okay. And afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Now, very few places in the Bible will you see women named or being named. And this daughter, this child, relates to a story later on in Genesis, and seemingly that's why they had her name in there to support that story. They probably had other girls too, but remember, if they bore girls, there was nothing. They didn't care. So they could have had girls, and they didn't hardly even consider it a birth. And even today, and in the Near East, Palestine, Arabia, if a girl is born, okay, a woman's pregnant, she has a child. If a boy is born, then it's party celebration time. People come to the house. It's la la la, kind of like the nativity scene and whatnot. But if a girl is born, they'll hang like a dark wreath on the door, and that's that. There's no celebration. There's no anything. And that's, I'm told by someone who came from there, it's still that way today. So, well, and we see from Arabia and that part of the country where women still have to be covered up and they're not treated very well. But anyway, all right, now. This little interlude that we just read, of course, Leah was always competing for Jacob's affection. Now, it doesn't say there, but it says, and Rachel said she would let Jacob sleep with Leah if she got the mandrakes. So, but really what happens is typically the man with many wives would have a time each day for each wife. We just spend time with each wife, but essentially what happened here is, men could do whatever they wanted. It didn't matter if there was a belief or a law, they did what. And he was spending his time with Rachel. So Rachel said, okay, he can go with you again, but give me the mandrakes. All right, and the key is the mandrakes didn't work for Rachel. She got the mandrakes, but they didn't work because she did not conceive. Okay, so let's look at mandrakes. Just a really cool subject. All right, now the mandrake, I really never paid that much attention. I guess when we studied it with Dr. Erica, it's like, okay, but the mandrake is a plant, and one of the I don't know, the magical things or whatever, or the mythological things, or however, is that the plant itself and the roots in the ground look just like a human body. As you can, and I have that picture there, and it isn't just here in the Bible, but the plant itself, it has in many I don't know what you call it, mystical meanings and whatnot. And then as you go along, it's used as medication and herbal and all that kind of stuff. So it is a plant, and that's what it looks like above the ground. And you'll notice there's one other place in the Bible that talks about them, that mentions them, and that's in the Song of Solomon 7:13. The mandrakes give forth fragrance, and at our gates are all manner of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I have kept for you, O my beloved. And you know that the Song of Solomon is love, love songs and gentlemen. Can't use the right word. Gentlemen courting women. We'll use that word.
I don't like foreplay.
Well, okay. See, you can say that, but but I can't. Well, yeah. Well, listen. If you read the Songs of Solomon, they're very very open. I mean, it's not pornography, but it's very descriptive.
Very erotic.
Exactly. Anyways, okay. So the question was, and I think a lot of people ask the question for years. All right, so they have the plant, but what was it about the plant? And some people had said, oh, well, they made a concoction out of it and it came from the root and all that, and they drank it, but not the case. At least in the Bible, what it was the fragrance that served as the aphrodisiac. And the belief, okay, the Orientals believed that the fragrance of mandrakes guaranteed or at least facilitated conception. So it was the fragrance from the mandrakes, and it wasn't a potion or whatnot. That's what some people said. And so sufficient evidence was found to conclude that the appearance of this plant on the biblical scene is not due, as was commonly believed, to alleged magic power of its root, but to the unique fragrance furnished by the fruits of mandrake. So I would just kind of say that perhaps it's probably just like marijuana. If you get close to a marijuana plant, I mean, you know, people smoke it, but there is a fragrance and odor that can do that. Anyway, so that's what mandrake is. It's not an animal, it's a plant. And that's what it was, Rachel's way, one more time, of trying to conceive. All right. Now, so we get down here to verse 22. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. And remember, that's her disgrace for being barren for all those years. God has taken that away, and she's no longer barren, so she's no longer in disfavor with God or Jacob or anybody. Okay. And she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Now, the main point of this, and actually kind of like the denouement of the story, is that, you know, we talked about it takes to conceive and birth a child. It takes three. It takes God, God has to be part of it. I mean, God is part of it. And in this case, Rachel didn't conceive because of the mandrakes. That didn't work. That was not it. But it was God, and it was her time finally to conceive and birth. So it was God and not the mandrakes that opened Rachel's womb. All right. Now, the part of the part of this, we talked about God, God's plan, so to speak. And Jacob, of course, he served his 7 years and then 7 years, and it's considered part and parcel of God's plan, because it allowed Jacob to mature, to learn all of these ins and outs of human life and whatnot. And then the interesting thing about Rachel, okay, this is her first real son conceived by her, and he was named Joseph. Now, Joseph, it's like you go back to Ishmael and Isaac, and Isaac became the guy his descendants were going to carry on the covenant. Okay, then Jacob comes along, and of course, Jacob wasn't the firstborn. I'm sorry. Isaac was not the firstborn. Jacob wasn't the firstborn. And you'll notice here, now there's a lot more about this in coming chapters, but Joseph, okay, Reuben was technically the firstborn, okay, but he was to Leah, and Leah was not the one chosen by God. Let's just put it that way. And in the story of God's plan. And so Rachel has Joseph, and Joseph becomes the significant prince and leader of the Hebrews, even though it's in a different way, but he does. And once again, Reuben, the firstborn, it's just a side. Well, all of these, okay, that wasn't God's way. I guess that wasn't what God had intended. And all the sons that Leah bore became part of the 12 tribes. And but Joseph, the firstborn to Rachel, becomes essentially the leader of the Hebrews in the future. As we'll get to that. So now, what I did is I just summed up these names here. According to Jewish theology and their religion, they of course are very strong on all of this, because that's their ancestors, and they trace that all back, and of course it's their religion too, religion and ancestors. And so they all had names with meanings, and we saw 4 of them last week. And so and you kind of read it, and when you read the passages, they're there too. So Dan meant judge. Naphtali essentially went my struggle. Gad is fortune or luck. Happy and blessed. Asher, Issachar, reward will come. Zebulon, exaltation, which I believe I spelled wrong, but okay. And Joseph, it says he will add, and I'm not sure when it says that okay, he will add another son. Remember, there's still one missing. Well, all right. later on, Rachel has a second son, Benjamin. Okay, and what's interesting, and I guess we will, as we go, we'll figure this out. All right, Joseph was not one of the 12 tribes. Okay, because remember he gets sold out by his brothers and whatnot, and and goes to and ends up in Egypt. But it's just interesting to note, because I was doing this, and then I thought, wait a minute, Joseph's not listed as the one of the 12 tribes, and of course, no, he wasn't, but he was ultimately the leader because he was in Egypt, and he led the people there, and he, what do you say, negotiated for the people, I guess, once they figured out he was a Hebrew. So anyway, that's that's it for barrenness. And next week, Jacob and all his wives and people